Think like a strategist. Train your mind for sharp thinking and intelligent action. Published by Timeless Audiobook. Introduction. Sharp thinking has always separated the people who shape the world from the people who simply react to it. Long before power was measured by technology, status, or money, it was measured by the ability to observe clearly, think deeply, and act intelligently under pressure. Every great leader, builder, negotiator, inventor, and visionary understood one truth: life rewards the person who can think strategically when others become emotional, distracted, or impulsive. A strategist sees what others overlook. While ordinary minds become trapped inside immediate problems, the strategic mind searches for patterns, timing, leverage, and opportunity. It understands that every decision carries consequences, every action creates momentum, and every habit quietly shapes the future. This way of thinking is not reserved for military generals or powerful executives. It is a skill that can be developed by anyone willing to train the mind with patience, discipline, and awareness. In this audiobook, we will explore how strategic thinkers approach decisions, handle pressure, communicate with precision, manage emotions, anticipate outcomes, and position themselves for long-term success. You will learn how to sharpen your awareness, protect your focus, strengthen your judgment, and stop reacting emotionally to temporary situations. More importantly, you will learn how to think with clarity in a world filled with distraction and noise. Strategic thinking changes the quality of your actions because it changes the quality of your perspective. Instead of moving through life blindly, you begin moving with intention. Instead of wasting energy on unnecessary battles, you begin directing your attention toward meaningful results. The goal of this audiobook is simple: to help you build a calmer mind, a sharper perspective, and a more intelligent approach to life. Because when the mind learns to think strategically, every decision becomes more powerful. Chapter 1. Learn to see beyond the obvious. A strategic mind is trained to notice what other people ignore. While many people focus only on what is directly in front of them, strategic thinkers learn to step back and study the larger picture. They understand that surface problems are rarely the real problems. Behind every conflict, every failure, every missed opportunity, and every success, there is usually a deeper pattern at work. The ability to see beyond the obvious is what separates intelligent action from emotional reaction. Think about how quickly people jump to conclusions in everyday life. A disagreement happens at work, and someone immediately assumes they are being disrespected. A business slows down, and panic takes over before any real analysis happens. A relationship becomes difficult, and people react emotionally without trying to understand the real source of tension. Human beings naturally focus on immediate events because the mind is designed to react quickly to pressure. But strategic thinking requires something different. It requires distance. It requires patience. It requires the discipline to pause before forming conclusions. When you learn to see beyond the obvious, you stop becoming controlled by appearances. You begin asking better questions. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin asking, "What is this situation trying to reveal?" That shift changes everything, because intelligent people understand that life often hides important truths beneath the surface. Elliot Grayson understood this lesson later than he wanted to. For nearly 20 years, he worked as a newspaper editor in Chicago. He loved traditional journalism and believed newspapers would always matter because people needed trustworthy information. But over time, readership declined, advertising revenue disappeared, and younger audiences stopped buying physical papers altogether. Inside the company, frustration grew stronger every month. Meetings became tense. Employees blamed social media, technology companies, and changing culture for the collapse of the industry. At first, Elliot reacted exactly like everyone else. He became angry at change itself. He complained constantly about how people no longer appreciated quality reporting. He believed the world was becoming shallow and distracted. But one evening, after another exhausting meeting about layoffs and financial losses, he sat alone in his office and realized something important. The real threat was not technology. The real threat was resistance. The company was trying to preserve old methods in a completely new environment. While the world evolved, they remained emotionally attached to familiarity. Eliot suddenly understood that strategic thinking is not about protecting the past. It is about understanding reality clearly enough to adapt intelligently. Over the next year, he completely changed his approach. Instead of fighting digital media, he studied it carefully. He analyzed how people consumed information, what captured attention, and why younger audiences behaved differently. While others continued complaining, Eliot started building digital storytelling systems for the newspaper. He created short-form investigative content, redesigned the publication's online presence, and trained younger writers to combine traditional journalism with modern communication methods. Many people inside the company resisted him at first. They believed he was abandoning the identity of the newspaper. But Eliot was no longer reacting emotionally to appearances. He was seeing the larger game, and eventually the publication stabilized while many competing newspapers disappeared entirely. This is how strategic thinkers operate. They do not become trapped inside emotional attachment. They focus on understanding reality as it truly is, not as they wish it would be. That mindset gives them an enormous advantage because life changes constantly. Industries change, relationships change, opportunities change, circumstances change. And the people who survive and grow are usually the ones willing to see clearly instead of react emotionally. Learning to see beyond the obvious also changes the way you view people. Strategic thinkers understand that behavior often reveals more than words. Confidence sometimes hides insecurity. Anger sometimes hides fear. Arrogance sometimes hides weakness. A person who constantly seeks attention may actually feel invisible inside. Once you understand this, you stop reacting to surface-level behavior and start understanding deeper motivations. This does not mean becoming suspicious of everyone. It means becoming observant. Calm awareness allows you to move through life with greater intelligence. You stop wasting energy reacting to every situation emotionally because you understand that immediate appearances are often incomplete. A strategic life begins with deeper observation. It begins when you stop accepting every situation at face value and start looking beneath the surface, because the obvious answer is not always the correct answer. And the people who learn to see clearly gain an advantage that impulsive minds rarely understand. Chapter 2. Never let emotion make your decisions. Emotion is powerful, immediate, and deeply human. It can inspire courage, create passion, strengthen relationships, and push people to fight for what matters. But emotion can also become dangerous when it takes control of decision-making. Some of the worst choices people make in life happen in moments of anger, fear, pride, jealousy, desperation, or insecurity. A single emotional decision can damage a career, destroy trust, ruin opportunities, or create consequences that last for years. Strategic thinkers understand this clearly. They do not ignore emotions, but they refuse to become controlled by them. One of the greatest advantages you can develop in life is the ability to remain mentally steady while everyone else becomes emotionally reactive. Calm thinking creates clarity. Emotional thinking creates distortion. When emotions rise too high, perspective becomes narrow. People stop seeing reality accurately. They focus only on immediate relief instead of long-term consequences. That is why intelligent action almost always begins with emotional control. Think about how many people ruin opportunities because they react too quickly. Someone receives criticism at work and immediately responds defensively. A business owner faces financial pressure and starts making desperate decisions out of panic. A relationship becomes tense, and harsh words are spoken in temporary anger that create permanent damage. In each situation, emotion takes control before wisdom has a chance to speak. Strategic thinkers train themselves differently. They understand that emotions are temporary, but decisions often are not. Instead of reacting instantly, they create space between feeling and action. That space is where intelligent thinking lives. The ability to pause before responding may seem simple, but it changes the entire direction of a person's life. Victor Hale learned this lesson during the most humiliating season of his career. He worked as a respected trial consultant in New York, helping attorneys prepare for high-profile courtroom cases. Victor was intelligent, confident, and highly skilled at reading people. For years, his reputation grew quickly because of his sharp communication style and aggressive personality. He believed strong pressure and emotional intensity were signs of leadership. Then one public mistake changed everything. During a nationally recognized corporate fraud case, Victor became frustrated during a press conference after reporters questioned the legal strategy of the defense team. Feeling personally attacked, he lost control emotionally and responded with visible anger. His comments spread across television and online media within hours. What should have been a professional legal discussion suddenly became a public embarrassment. Critics described him as unstable and arrogant. Clients began distancing themselves from him. Within weeks, several major contracts disappeared. At first, Victor blamed everyone else. He blamed the media. He blamed public opinion. He blamed the pressure of the situation, but privately, he knew the truth. His career had not been damaged by the reporters. It had been damaged by his inability to control himself emotionally in a critical moment. For the first time in years, Victor stopped focusing on defending his ego and started studying his own behavior honestly. He realized that beneath his confidence was a constant need to protect his image. Whenever he felt challenged, his emotions reacted before his judgment could respond. His anger was not strength. It was insecurity disguised as confidence. That realization changed him completely. Over the next 2 years, Victor rebuilt himself slowly. He became quieter during meetings. He learned to listen fully before speaking. He practiced staying calm during difficult conversations instead of trying to dominate them emotionally. He trained himself to separate feelings from decisions, and something surprising happened. People began trusting him more than before. His composure created credibility. His restraint created influence. Clients noticed that he no longer reacted impulsively under pressure. Instead of appearing emotionally intense, he appeared mentally strong. The same people who once viewed him as unstable now viewed him as dependable. This is one of the hidden truths about strategic thinking. Calmness is not weakness. In many situations, calmness is power. Emotional people are predictable because their reactions control them. But calm people create uncertainty because they remain in control of themselves. That self-control allows them to think clearly while others lose perspective. Emotional discipline also protects long-term goals. A person who cannot control temporary emotions will constantly sabotage future opportunities. Pride may destroy relationships, anger may damage reputation, fear may prevent growth, impatience may ruin progress. Every strategic thinker eventually learns that mastering the external world begins with mastering the internal world first. This does not mean becoming emotionless. Human emotion is natural and important. The goal is not to suppress feelings completely. The goal is to prevent feelings from controlling decisions. You can feel frustration without acting recklessly. You can feel fear without surrendering to it. You can feel anger without allowing it to guide your words or behavior. A strategic mind understands that emotional storms eventually pass, but the consequences of impulsive decisions often remain. That is why disciplined thinkers slow themselves down during emotional moments. They observe their reactions carefully. They give themselves time to think clearly before taking action. The ability to stay composed under pressure is one of the rarest forms of strength in modern life. In a world where people react instantly to everything, emotional control creates enormous advantage. Because the person who remains calm while others lose control is often the person who quietly takes control of the situation itself. Chapter 3. Stop playing small games with your energy. Energy is one of the most valuable resources you possess, yet many people waste it without realizing it. They spend their mental strength on arguments that lead nowhere, distractions that add no value, and emotional battles that quietly drain their focus. By the end of the day, they feel exhausted, but they have made very little meaningful progress. Strategic thinkers understand something important that impulsive people often ignore. Success is not only about managing time, it is about managing energy. You can have talent, intelligence, ambition, and opportunity, but if your energy is constantly scattered in 10 different directions, your life begins to lose momentum. A distracted mind struggles to build anything powerful because focus requires energy, and energy disappears quickly when it is spent carelessly. This is why strategic people become extremely selective about where they place their attention, emotions, and effort. One unnecessary conflict can consume your thoughts for hours. One toxic relationship can drain your motivation for months. One habit of constant distraction can quietly weaken your discipline for years. Strategic thinkers understand that every commitment has a cost. Every conversation, every responsibility, every emotional reaction, and every environment either strengthens your mind or weakens it. Intelligent people learn to ask themselves a simple question before giving energy to anything. Does this move my life forward or pull me backward? Caleb Mercer spent years learning this lesson the hard way. He owned a popular restaurant in Denver and was known for working harder than almost anyone around him. He arrived before sunrise, stayed long after closing time, and constantly pushed himself to keep the business growing. On the surface, people admired his work ethic, but privately, Caleb felt mentally exhausted almost every day. The problem was not the restaurant itself. The problem was how much unnecessary energy he wasted on things that had nothing to do with building a successful business. He involved himself in every employee disagreement, every customer complaint, every rumor, and every emotional situation inside the restaurant. If two workers argued, Caleb absorbed the stress personally. If one negative online review appeared, it ruined his mood for the entire day. If competitors succeeded, he became distracted by comparison and frustration instead of focusing on improving his own business. Over time, the constant emotional pressure began affecting his health, relationships, and decision-making. He slept poorly. He became impatient with employees. Small problems started feeling overwhelming because his mind never had time to recover. Eventually, after an argument with a long-time manager over a minor mistake, Caleb realized something important. He was not losing energy because of hard work. He was losing energy because he had no boundaries. That realization changed the direction of his life. Instead of reacting emotionally to every situation, Caleb started becoming more intentional with his attention. He stopped trying to control every small issue inside the restaurant. He trained trusted employees to handle problems independently. He limited unnecessary meetings. He stopped obsessing over criticism that added no value. More importantly, he learned how to separate emotional noise from meaningful priorities. Within months, his thinking became clearer. His decisions improved. He felt calmer, sharper, and more focused. Ironically, the business grew faster once he stopped wasting energy trying to fight every small battle. Caleb finally understood that strategic people do not win because they work endlessly. They win because they direct their energy intelligently. This lesson applies far beyond business. Many people stay mentally exhausted because they are constantly reacting to things that do not deserve their emotional investment. They argue online with strangers they will never meet. They obsess over other people's opinions. They involve themselves in drama that adds nothing to their future. They carry emotional resentment long after situations are over. Every one of these habits drains mental strength that could be used for growth, creativity, discipline, or meaningful progress. A strategic mind learns how to protect its internal environment carefully. It understands that focus is fragile. Once your attention becomes scattered, your judgment weakens. You become more impulsive, less patient, and easier to distract. This is why disciplined thinkers become selective about the people they spend time with, the conversations they entertain, and the environments they allow into their lives. Protecting your energy also means learning when to walk away. Not every disagreement deserves your response. Not every opportunity deserves your attention. Not every person deserves unlimited access to your mind. Strategic thinkers understand that saying yes to everything often means saying no to what matters most. This requires maturity because emotional minds often confuse activity with importance. They believe being busy means being productive, but strategic people know the difference. They understand that real progress usually comes from concentrated effort applied in the right direction, not constant movement without purpose. Your mind performs best when it has clarity, stability, and focus. But clarity becomes impossible when your energy is constantly leaking into distractions, negativity, and emotional chaos. That is why strategic living requires intentional boundaries. It requires discipline over attention. It requires learning how to stay centered while the world constantly competes for your focus. Every day, life presents you with countless opportunities to waste your energy. Small arguments, endless distractions, temporary drama, emotional reactions. None of these things create meaningful progress. They only consume attention that could be used to build a stronger future. Strategic thinkers understand a simple truth that changes everything. Your energy determines the quality of your thinking, and the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your life. Chapter 4. Think in consequences before you act. Every action creates a result, but strategic thinkers understand something even deeper. Every result creates another result after that. Life moves in chains. One decision influences another. One habit creates another habit. One emotional reaction can quietly shape an entire future. Yet many people move through life thinking only about immediate outcomes. They focus on what feels good now, what solves today's discomfort, or what satisfies temporary emotion, without considering the larger consequences waiting further ahead. Strategic thinking requires a different mindset. It requires learning how to pause and mentally travel into the future before taking action. Instead of asking only, "What will happen next?" strategic people ask, "And then what?" That simple question creates enormous clarity because it forces the mind to think beyond short-term emotion and immediate reward. Impulsive decisions often feel attractive because they promise quick relief. Angry words may feel satisfying in the moment. Reckless spending may create temporary excitement. Avoiding responsibility may feel comfortable today. But strategic minds understand that every short-term decision eventually arrives at a long-term destination. The problem is that many consequences appear slowly, which makes them easy to ignore at first. By the time the damage becomes visible, the pattern has already become deeply rooted. This is why intelligent people train themselves to think ahead emotionally, financially, professionally, and personally. They understand that life is shaped less by dramatic moments and more by repeated decisions that quietly accumulate over time. Nathaniel Cross learned this lesson during the rise of his political consulting career in Washington, D.C. He was ambitious, sharp, and highly respected for his ability to build aggressive campaign strategies. Politicians trusted him because he understood public perception better than most people in the industry. Nathaniel knew how to create momentum, influence narratives, and attract media attention quickly. His confidence grew stronger with every successful campaign. Then one impulsive decision nearly destroyed everything he had built. During a heated election season, Nathaniel advised one of his clients to publicly attack a political opponent using damaging personal information that had recently surfaced online. The strategy worked immediately. News channels exploded with controversy. Social media reacted intensely. Public attention shifted overnight, and the campaign gained short-term momentum. Nathaniel celebrated the victory at first. He believed he had outmaneuvered the competition strategically. But within weeks, the situation began changing in ways he had not anticipated. Independent voters started viewing the campaign as manipulative and unethical. Donors became cautious. Trusted colleagues quietly distanced themselves from him. Even inside his own team, people began questioning his judgment. What Nathaniel failed to understand was that the immediate success of the attack created long-term damage to trust and credibility. He had focused only on winning the moment without considering the deeper consequences attached to the strategy. For months afterward, he struggled professionally. Several clients stopped returning his calls. His reputation changed from respected strategist to reckless opportunist almost overnight. The experience forced him into a painful period of reflection. He realized that intelligence without foresight becomes dangerous. Just because something creates a short-term advantage does not mean it creates long-term success. That realization completely changed the way he approached decisions. Nathaniel became slower, more thoughtful, and far more careful about consequences. Before recommending any strategy, he started examining how it would affect reputation, trust, relationships, and future opportunities months or even years later. He stopped chasing temporary victories that carried hidden costs. And over time, his credibility slowly returned because people recognized the difference in his thinking. This is one of the defining qualities of strategic people. They understand second-order consequences. Average thinkers see only the first result of a decision. Strategic thinkers look further ahead. They understand that every choice creates ripple effects that extend far beyond the present moment. This way of thinking changes everything. It changes how you handle money because you begin understanding that small financial habits eventually shape freedom or stress. It changes how you handle health because daily choices quietly determine future strength or weakness. It changes relationships because you realize trust is built slowly through repeated actions and destroyed quickly through careless behavior. Thinking in consequences also strengthens emotional discipline. Many emotional reactions lose their power once you fully understand where they lead. An angry response may feel satisfying for 10 seconds but create years of tension. Avoiding difficult work may create temporary comfort but long-term regret. Strategic thinkers train themselves to mentally connect present actions to future outcomes. This does not mean becoming fearful or overthinking every decision endlessly. Strategic thinking is not paralysis, it is awareness. It is understanding that intelligent action requires perspective. People who constantly react emotionally often become trapped in cycles they never intended to create because they fail to think beyond immediate emotion. The future is rarely shaped by one giant decision alone. More often, it is shaped by small, repeated choices that seem harmless in the moment. That is why strategic thinkers pay attention to direction, not just intention. They know that actions, repeated consistently, eventually create identity, reputation, opportunity, and destiny. Every decision you make is quietly building something. The question is whether it is building the life you truly want, or slowly leading you somewhere you never intended to go. Strategic people understand that consequences are always connected to choices, even when the connection is not immediately visible. And the ability to think ahead before acting is one of the greatest advantages a person can develop in life. Chapter 5. Train yourself to stay calm under pressure. Pressure reveals the true condition of the mind. Anyone can appear confident and composed when life feels comfortable, predictable, and easy. But real mental strength becomes visible during uncertainty, conflict, chaos, and high-stakes situations. Strategic thinkers understand this deeply. They know that pressure is not simply an obstacle to survive. It is a test of emotional discipline, mental clarity, and self-control. When pressure rises, the average mind tends to narrow, fear increases, emotions become louder, small problems begin feeling larger than they truly are. People rush decisions, speak impulsively, and lose perspective because the nervous system shifts into survival mode. In those moments, intelligence alone is not enough. Calmness becomes a competitive advantage. One of the most important skills you can develop in life is the ability to think clearly while others panic. Calm people see solutions that emotional people miss. They communicate more effectively. They make fewer reckless decisions. They preserve energy instead of wasting it on fear and confusion. Strategic thinking depends heavily on emotional steadiness because a restless mind struggles to analyze situations accurately. Pressure itself is not always the real danger. Often the danger comes from the way people react to pressure. Panic creates mistakes that calm thinking could have prevented. Fear causes people to abandon long-term plans for short-term comfort. Stress pushes people toward impulsive behavior that damages future opportunities. This is why strategic thinkers train themselves to slow down mentally during difficult moments instead of speeding up emotionally. Julian Whitmore understood this lesson during one of the most difficult nights of his medical career. He worked as an emergency room physician at a major hospital in Boston and was known for being intelligent, hard-working, and dependable. But one winter evening, a severe highway accident involving multiple vehicles flooded the emergency department with critically injured patients all at once. The hospital instantly became overwhelmed. Doctors rushed through hallways, nurses struggled to organize patients, and fear spread rapidly throughout the building. At first, even Julian felt the pressure tightening inside him. The noise, confusion, and urgency created an atmosphere where panic could easily take control. Family members were crying, staff members were shouting instructions across crowded rooms. Every second felt important. In moments like that, the emotional energy of fear becomes contagious. Then Julian noticed something that changed his entire mindset. The more emotionally reactive people became around him, the more mistakes started happening. Important information was missed, communication became unclear, small errors created larger complications. He realized that panic was beginning to spread faster than the actual medical crisis itself. Instead of allowing himself to get emotionally swept into the chaos, Julian forced himself to slow down mentally. He lowered his voice instead of raising it. He focused carefully on one decision at a time. He spoke calmly to the medical staff around him, even while the pressure intensified. That calmness slowly changed the atmosphere inside the emergency room. Other doctors began stabilizing emotionally. Nurses communicated more clearly. The entire team became more organized because one person chose composure instead of panic. Hours later, after the crisis had finally passed, one of the senior surgeons told Julian something he never forgot. "People trust the calmest person in the room," he said, "especially when things fall apart." That sentence captures an important truth about strategic thinking. Calmness creates trust because it signals control. When people panic, they lose confidence in their ability to handle situations effectively. But when someone remains composed under pressure, others naturally begin looking toward them for guidance. This principle applies far beyond emergency situations. In business, relationships, leadership, negotiations, parenting, and personal growth, calmness often determines the quality of decisions. A person who loses emotional control during stress becomes reactive. A calm person remains observant and intentional. Training yourself to stay calm does not mean pretending pressure does not exist. Strategic people feel stress just like everyone else. The difference is that they do not allow stress to dominate their thinking. They recognize emotional pressure without surrendering control to it. One reason calmness is so powerful is because it creates mental space. Under pressure, emotional people focus only on immediate survival. Their thinking becomes narrow and impulsive, but calm thinkers maintain access to perspective. They can still analyze options, anticipate consequences, and communicate effectively because their minds remain organized instead of overwhelmed. This is why preparation matters so much. Confidence under pressure rarely comes from blind optimism. It usually comes from preparation, repetition, and self-discipline. Strategic thinkers reduce panic by strengthening their ability to handle difficult situations before those situations arrive. Preparation builds familiarity, and familiarity reduces fear. Calmness is also strengthened through perspective. Many stressful situations feel overwhelming because people convince themselves that temporary problems are permanent disasters. Strategic thinkers challenge this mindset. They remind themselves that pressure passes, emotions settle, and difficult moments eventually end. That perspective prevents temporary stress from controlling permanent decisions. Life will always contain pressure. Unexpected problems, uncertainty, setbacks, and difficult moments are unavoidable parts of the human experience. The goal is not to eliminate pressure completely. The goal is to become stronger within it. A calm mind sees clearly. A clear mind makes better decisions, and better decisions create stronger outcomes over time. That is why strategic thinkers do not measure strength only by intelligence, talent, or ambition. They measure strength by the ability to remain steady when pressure tries to break focus, distort judgment, and take control of the mind. Chapter 6. Position yourself before opportunity appears. Opportunities rarely arrive with warning. They appear suddenly, often during moments when unprepared people are forced to watch someone else step forward. Strategic thinkers understand this reality well. They know success is not built only in visible moments of achievement. It is built quietly long before recognition ever arrives. While others wait for ideal conditions, strategic people prepare themselves in advance. They develop skills, strengthen discipline, build relationships, and increase their value before anyone asks them to. This way of thinking requires patience because preparation often feels invisible in the beginning. The world tends to celebrate outcomes while ignoring the years of unseen effort behind them. Many people become discouraged because they want immediate rewards for every action. They want recognition before mastery. They want opportunities before readiness. But strategic thinkers understand that positioning always comes before advancement. Imagine two people standing in the same room when opportunity finally arrives. One person hopes they are capable enough, the other already prepared years earlier. The difference between those two people is rarely luck, it is positioning. Strategic people quietly build themselves long before circumstances demand it. They understand that the future belongs to those who are ready when timing changes. Because timing always changes eventually. Dominic Hayes understood this better than anyone inside the television network where he worked. For nearly 8 years, he served as an assistant producer for a struggling media company in Los Angeles. His position was ordinary, his salary was average, and few people inside the company paid much attention to him. Most employees viewed him as reliable but forgettable. He was not loud in meetings, did not chase attention, and rarely tried to impress executives through aggressive self-promotion. But Dominic had a different mindset from many of his co-workers. While others focused only on surviving each workday, he quietly treated every year as preparation for something larger. After work, he studied editing software, production strategy, audience psychology, and storytelling structure. He volunteered for difficult projects nobody else wanted. He spent time learning how different departments operated instead of limiting himself to his assigned role. At times, the process felt frustrating. Promotions passed him by. Less capable employees received more public recognition because they were louder and more politically connected. Dominic often questioned whether his preparation truly mattered, but he continued building himself quietly because he believed one important principle: opportunity eventually exposes preparation. Then the unexpected happened. The network entered a period of financial instability, and several senior executives suddenly resigned within months of each other. Entire production teams became disorganized, projects stalled, leadership struggled to stabilize operations because too many experienced people had disappeared at once. For the first time in years, the company desperately needed someone who understood multiple areas of production and could handle responsibility immediately. While others panicked or waited for instructions, Dominic already knew how the systems worked. He had prepared himself long before the crisis arrived. Executives quickly noticed the difference. He solved problems calmly, communicated clearly, and adapted faster than almost anyone else in the building. Within a year, Dominic moved from assistant producer into a leadership role that many people believed would take another decade to reach. But in reality, it had been built quietly over years of preparation nobody noticed. This is how strategic positioning works. Intelligent people do not wait until opportunity arrives to start developing themselves. They understand that preparation creates confidence, and confidence creates readiness. When important moments appear, prepared people move naturally because they already invested in growth beforehand. Many people miss opportunities not because they lack talent, but because they delayed preparation. They assumed they would become disciplined later. They believed they would study harder once success arrived. They planned to strengthen communication skills only after receiving leadership roles, but life rarely works that way. Opportunities often reward the people who prepared before recognition existed. Positioning also requires long-term thinking. Strategic people are willing to invest effort into things that may not produce immediate rewards because they understand delayed results. They know today's preparation often becomes tomorrow's advantage. Reading, learning, networking, saving money, strengthening health, and improving discipline may seem small in the moment, but over time these actions quietly create leverage. This mindset removes desperation from decision-making. Unprepared people often panic because they depend completely on circumstances outside their control. Prepared people remain steadier because they already built internal strength before pressure arrived. They trust their ability to adapt because they invested in themselves consistently over time. Strategic thinkers also understand that preparation is not only professional, emotional preparation matters too. Mentally strong people prepare themselves for pressure, setbacks, criticism, uncertainty, and responsibility before those situations arrive. They know success often creates challenges that weak minds cannot handle. That is why intelligent people strengthen both skill and character together. Positioning yourself before opportunity appears requires faith in long-term growth. It means continuing to build even when recognition is absent. It means becoming valuable before rewards become visible. This is difficult because modern culture encourages immediate validation. People want visible progress quickly. But strategic minds understand that quiet preparation often creates the strongest foundation. One day, circumstances will change. An opportunity will appear unexpectedly. A door will open. A challenge will arise. And when that moment comes, the question will not simply be whether you want success. The real question will be whether you prepared yourself to handle it. Because opportunity rarely changes people overnight, more often it reveals who was already preparing long before anyone was watching. Chapter 7. Learn the psychology of human nature. Strategic thinking becomes far more powerful when you understand people. Every business, relationship, negotiation, conflict, friendship, and leadership situation is shaped by human behavior. Yet many people move through life without truly studying how people think, what motivates them, or why they behave the way they do. They react only to words and appearances while missing the deeper emotional forces operating underneath. Strategic thinkers pay attention to those deeper forces because they understand an important truth. People are rarely driven by logic alone. Human beings are emotional creatures who often justify decisions with logic afterward. Pride, fear, insecurity, ambition, loneliness, validation, envy, ego, and the desire for significance quietly shape behavior every single day. Once you begin recognizing these patterns, the world starts making more sense. You stop being constantly surprised by people because you understand that behavior usually reflects emotional needs hidden beneath the surface. This awareness gives strategic thinkers a major advantage. They become better communicators because they understand emotion. They become better leaders because they understand motivation. They become calmer during conflict because they understand insecurity. Instead of reacting personally to everything, they observe behavior more objectively. One of the biggest mistakes people make is assuming everyone thinks the same way they do. Strategic minds avoid this trap. They study people carefully. They ask themselves, what is this person truly seeking? Respect, security, attention, control, approval. Often the visible behavior is only a surface expression of something deeper. Russell Bennett learned this lesson after years of frustration in his career as a luxury car salesman in Miami. On paper, he seemed talented. He understood the products, knew the technical details of every vehicle, and worked longer hours than many of his co-workers. Yet despite all his effort, his sales numbers remained inconsistent. Some months he performed well, but other months he struggled badly while less knowledgeable salespeople outperformed him. At first, Russell believed the problem was bad luck or weak customers. He assumed people simply could not recognize quality. But after watching one senior salesman consistently close deals with ease, he became curious. The older salesman was not more charismatic or more knowledgeable than Russell. In fact, he often spoke less, yet customers trusted him almost immediately. One afternoon, Russell finally asked him what made the difference. The older salesman smiled and gave a simple answer. "You're trying to sell cars." he said. "I'm trying to understand people." That sentence changed Russell's entire perspective. Over the following months, he started observing customers more carefully instead of focusing only on products. He noticed that wealthy buyers were rarely purchasing cars for transportation alone. Some wanted status because they felt invisible in other areas of life. Some wanted admiration. Others wanted to feel successful after years of struggle. Certain customers cared more about emotional experience than technical performance. Russell realized he had been communicating logically to emotional people. He was explaining horsepower and engineering, while customers were really buying confidence, identity, and recognition. Once he understood this, his approach changed completely. He listened more carefully. He asked deeper questions. He stopped trying to impress people and started trying to understand them. He became far better at reading human behavior in every area of life. He noticed how insecurity often disguised itself as arrogance. He recognized how anger sometimes hid embarrassment. He saw how desperately many people wanted validation, even when pretending not to care. This awareness changed the way he interacted with people. Instead of reacting emotionally to difficult personalities, he became more patient and observant. He stopped taking every negative interaction personally because he understood that many people were fighting internal battles invisible to others. This is one of the greatest benefits of understanding human nature. It reduces emotional reactivity. When you understand what drives behavior, you become calmer and more strategic in your responses. You stop expecting perfect logic from emotional human beings. People want to feel respected, valued, and important. Even highly successful individuals often carry hidden insecurities beneath outward confidence. This is why communication matters so much. A person who understands psychology knows how to disagree without humiliating others, how to lead without controlling people emotionally, and how to influence without unnecessary conflict. Understanding human nature also protects you from manipulation. Once you recognize emotional patterns clearly, you become harder to deceive. You notice when someone uses fear to control situations. You recognize when people seek validation through dominance or attention-seeking behavior. You become more emotionally grounded because you see beyond appearances. At the same time, this awareness should create wisdom, not cynicism. The goal is not to become suspicious of everyone. The goal is to become aware enough to navigate life intelligently. Strategic thinkers still value kindness, trust, and meaningful relationships, but they balance kindness with awareness because they understand human complexity. Every person you meet is shaped by desires, fears, insecurities, ambitions, memories, and emotional needs that may not be immediately visible. The strategic mind learns to observe these things quietly instead of reacting blindly to surface behavior. The more you understand human nature, the less chaotic the world becomes. You begin seeing patterns instead of confusion. You become more patient during conflict, more effective in communication, and more thoughtful in decision-making. Because in the end, strategic thinking is not only about understanding situations, it is also about understanding the people inside them. Chapter 8. Speak with precision and intent. Words shape relationships, opportunities, trust, influence, and reputation. A single sentence can open doors that remain closed for years, while another sentence spoken carelessly can destroy progress in moments. Strategic thinkers understand that communication is not simply about talking, it is about creating clarity, direction, and impact. They know that the way a person speaks often reveals the way that person thinks. Many people speak emotionally, impulsively, or excessively. They talk to release tension, defend ego, seek attention, or prove intelligence. But strategic communication operates differently. Strategic people speak with purpose. They choose words carefully. They understand timing. They know when to speak, when to stay silent, and when fewer words create greater influence. One reason communication matters so much is because perception shapes reality in human interaction. People may never fully know your intentions, but they will always experience your tone, behavior, and language. A person who communicates carelessly creates confusion and distrust. A person who communicates clearly creates confidence and stability. Strategic thinkers understand that words carry emotional weight. The same message delivered in two different ways can produce completely different outcomes. This is why emotionally reactive communication often creates unnecessary conflict. People speak too quickly when angry, too defensively when insecure, or too aggressively when trying to gain control. Instead of improving situations, they make them worse because emotion overrides clarity. Leon Foster learned this lesson during his career as a corporate negotiator in Atlanta. He built his reputation as a highly intelligent professional who could dominate difficult conversations. Leon was quick-thinking, persuasive, and confident under pressure. Inside negotiation meetings, he often spoke more than anyone else in the room because he believed constant argument and aggressive communication created leverage. At first, this style seemed effective. Leon won several major deals early in his career, and people admired his confidence. But over time, problems began appearing. Important clients became hesitant to work with him repeatedly. Meetings that should have ended in agreement often became tense and exhausting. Even when Leon technically won negotiations, relationships suffered afterward. One evening, after a particularly difficult meeting with a longtime client, Leon received unexpected feedback from his senior partner. The partner listened quietly before saying something that stayed in Leon's mind for years. "You spend so much energy trying to control conversations," he said, "that you stop hearing what people are actually saying." That observation disturbed Leon because he knew it was true. For the first time, he began studying his communication habits honestly. He realized he interrupted people constantly. He rushed to defend his ideas before fully understanding opposing perspectives. He viewed silence as weakness and conversation as competition. Most importantly, he believed influence came from speaking more forcefully instead of listening more carefully. Slowly, Leon changed his approach. During meetings, he stopped trying to dominate every conversation. He began listening fully before responding. He allowed silence to exist without rushing to fill it. Instead of speaking emotionally or defensively, he focused on clarity and precision. The results surprised him immediately. People became more open around him. Negotiations felt calmer and more productive. Clients trusted him more because they felt understood instead of pressured. Leon discovered that influence often comes not from controlling conversations, but from creating enough calmness for people to feel comfortable revealing their true thoughts. This is one of the hidden powers of strategic communication. Listening creates information, and information creates advantage. Emotional people speak constantly because they want control. Strategic people observe carefully because they want understanding. Silence itself can become powerful when used intentionally. Many people fear silence because they associate it with discomfort or weakness, but strategic thinkers understand that silence often reveals more than speech. During difficult conversations, silence allows emotions to settle and thoughts to become clearer. It also encourages other people to speak more honestly because they no longer feel interrupted or rushed. Precision matters as well. Strategic communicators avoid unnecessary words because too much talking weakens clarity. They understand that strong communication is not complicated communication. It is clear, calm, and intentional. A person who constantly over-explains often appears uncertain, while a person who speaks directly and thoughtfully creates confidence. This does not mean becoming cold or robotic. Human warmth still matters deeply in communication. Strategic thinkers know how to combine clarity with empathy. They understand that people respond not only to information, but also to emotional tone. Respectful communication creates openness. Humiliation creates resistance. Calmness creates trust. Communication also reveals emotional discipline. People who lose control verbally during pressure expose internal instability. Strategic thinkers recognize that emotional reactions damage credibility. This is why disciplined communication becomes especially important during conflict, criticism, or negotiation. Calm words spoken under pressure often carry more strength than loud emotional arguments. Another important principle is learning to communicate differently with different people. Not everyone processes information the same way. Some people respond to logic, others respond to emotion, reassurance, or vision. Strategic thinkers observe carefully and adapt their communication style without becoming dishonest or manipulative. Their goal is understanding, not performance. Every conversation shapes perception in some way. Over time, your communication style becomes part of your identity. People remember how you made them feel. They remember whether you listened, whether you stayed calm under pressure, and whether your words carried clarity or confusion. Strategic communication is ultimately about intentionality. It is the ability to speak in ways that strengthen trust, preserve clarity, reduce unnecessary conflict, and move situations forward intelligently. Because in life, opportunities are often influenced not only by what you know, but by how effectively you communicate what you know to others. Chapter 9. Protect your mind from noise. A distracted mind cannot think strategically. Clear thinking requires space, focus, and mental discipline, yet modern life constantly pulls attention in every direction. Notifications compete for focus every few minutes. Endless opinions flood social media. Entertainment never stops. News cycles create emotional overload. People absorb information all day long without realizing how deeply it affects the quality of their thinking. Over time, the mind becomes crowded, restless, and reactive. Strategic thinkers understand that attention is one of the most valuable forms of power. Whatever controls your attention eventually influences your emotions, habits, decisions, and direction in life. This is why protecting your mind from unnecessary noise becomes essential. Without mental clarity, intelligent action becomes difficult because distraction weakens judgment. Many people believe they have concentration problems when the real issue is overstimulation. Their minds never fully rest. They move constantly from one distraction to another without allowing themselves to think deeply about anything. Even moments of silence feel uncomfortable because they have trained themselves to depend on constant stimulation. But strategic thinking requires depth. It requires the ability to sit with ideas long enough to understand them fully. A distracted mind reacts quickly but rarely understands clearly. This is why intelligent people become intentional about what they consume mentally. They understand that the mind absorbs environments the same way the body absorbs food. Owen Carlyle learned this lesson during his years as an architecture student in Seattle. He was naturally creative, intelligent, and highly ambitious. Professors often praised his design ideas, and his future looked promising. Yet despite his talent, Owen struggled to complete important projects consistently. He constantly felt mentally scattered. Simple assignments took far longer than they should have, and his focus seemed weaker every year. At first, he blamed stress and academic pressure, but eventually he noticed a pattern in his daily life. Every few minutes, his attention shifted somewhere else. While studying, he checked his phone repeatedly. During conversations, his mind drifted towards social media, messages, or online entertainment. At night, instead of resting mentally, he consumed endless videos, opinions, and distractions until early morning. His mind never became still. One afternoon, after missing an important project deadline, Owen visited one of his professors to discuss his declining performance. The professor listened quietly before asking him a question that felt surprisingly direct. When was the last time you spent an entire day fully focused on one important thing? Owen could not answer. That moment forced him to confront something uncomfortable. He had been protecting his entertainment more carefully than his concentration. His attention had become fragmented because he constantly allowed outside noise to interrupt his thinking. Over the next several months, Owen slowly changed his habits. He stopped starting every morning with his phone. He reduced meaningless online consumption. He created long periods of uninterrupted work where distractions were removed completely. At first, the silence felt uncomfortable because his mind had become addicted to stimulation, but eventually something changed. His thinking became sharper, ideas flowed more naturally, he felt calmer, more focused, and mentally stronger than he had in years. Most importantly, he rediscovered the ability to think deeply. This is one of the greatest hidden advantages in modern life. The ability to focus deeply has become increasingly rare. Many people train themselves to consume information constantly without ever processing it carefully. They mistake endless exposure to information for wisdom, but strategic thinkers understand that wisdom comes from reflection, not overload. Noise is not only digital. Mental noise also comes from unnecessary drama, toxic environments, emotional chaos, and constant comparison with others. Some people spend so much time absorbing negativity that their minds lose clarity entirely. Every conversation becomes emotional. Every problem feels urgent. Every disagreement feels personal. Over time, this emotional noise weakens perspective. Strategic thinkers protect their internal environment carefully because they understand that mental clarity affects every decision. They become selective about the conversations they entertain, the information they consume, and the environments they allow into their lives. This does not mean disconnecting from reality completely. It means learning the difference between useful information and destructive overload. One of the most dangerous forms of noise is comparison. Constant exposure to other people's success, lifestyles, opinions, and achievements creates internal distraction. Instead of focusing on their own direction, many people become mentally trapped inside comparison and validation seeking. Strategic thinkers avoid this trap because they understand that comparison weakens focus. A distracted mind cannot build a meaningful life because its attention constantly moves toward other people's paths. Silence becomes important because silence allows the mind to organize itself. Some of the clearest thinking happens during moments when external noise disappears completely. Strategic people value solitude not because they dislike people, but because they understand the importance of hearing their own thoughts clearly. Mental clarity also improves emotional stability. Constant noise keeps the nervous system overstimulated, which increases anxiety, impatience, and impulsive behavior. A quieter mind becomes calmer, more observant, and more intentional. Strategic thinking depends on this calmness because clarity disappears when the mind becomes overwhelmed. Your attention shapes your reality more than you realize. Whatever repeatedly enters your mind eventually influences your thinking patterns, emotions, and decisions. This is why protecting your focus is not a small habit. It is a strategic necessity. A distracted mind drifts through life, reacting to whatever demands attention next. A focused mind moves intentionally toward meaningful goals. And in a world filled with endless noise, the ability to protect your mental clarity quietly becomes one of the greatest advantages a person can possess. Chapter 10. Learn to anticipate instead of react. One of the clearest differences between reactive people and strategic people is timing. Reactive people wait until problems appear before thinking seriously about them. Strategic people study patterns early, recognize warning signs, and prepare before situations fully unfold. They understand that life rewards awareness far more than panic. By the time a crisis becomes obvious to everyone, strategic thinkers have usually been adjusting quietly for months or even years. Anticipation is one of the most valuable mental skills a person can develop because it changes the way decisions are made. Instead of constantly being surprised by outcomes, strategic thinkers learn to recognize direction. They pay attention to trends, behaviors, habits, and subtle shifts that signal what may happen next. This does not mean predicting the future perfectly. It means becoming observant enough to reduce unnecessary surprises. Many people spend their lives reacting emotionally because they never pause long enough to think ahead. They ignore warning signs in relationships until trust collapses. They ignore financial habits until debt becomes overwhelming. They ignore health problems until their bodies force them to change. In every area of life, small patterns usually appear long before major consequences arrive. Strategic thinkers train themselves to notice those patterns early. This mindset creates stability because anticipation allows preparation. A person who sees potential problems early has time to adapt calmly. A person who ignores warning signs often becomes trapped inside emergency thinking, and emergency thinking usually leads to emotional decisions. Garrett Holloway understood this lesson during his years running a small shipping company in Ohio. For nearly a decade, his business operated steadily. The company was not enormous, but it provided a comfortable life for Garrett and his employees. Most of his competitors focused only on short-term profits and daily operations, but Garrett had a habit that separated him from others in the industry. He constantly studied patterns. He paid attention to economic reports, fuel trends, customer behavior, supply chain disruptions, and changes in manufacturing demand. While many business owners dismissed these details as unimportant, Garrett treated them like signals. He believed small changes often pointed toward larger future shifts. One year, he began noticing several unusual patterns at the same time. Manufacturing orders started slowing slightly, fuel prices became unstable, large companies began cutting transportation expenses quietly. Nothing looked catastrophic yet, but Garrett sensed movement beneath the surface. Many people around him believed the economy remained strong, but he felt something changing. Instead of waiting for certainty, Garrett started preparing strategically. He reduced unnecessary expenses inside the company. He strengthened cash reserves. He avoided taking on risky debt, even though expansion opportunities looked tempting. He also diversified part of the business into regional delivery contracts that were less vulnerable to economic instability. Months later, a major economic downturn hit the transportation industry hard. Many shipping companies collapsed because they had expanded aggressively during good times without preparing for changing conditions. Panic spread quickly. Business owners rushed to cut losses after the damage had already begun, but Garrett remained stable. His preparation allowed him to survive while competitors struggled desperately. In fact, because he had protected resources carefully, he was eventually able to acquire contracts from failing competitors at favorable terms. What looked like luck to outsiders was actually anticipation combined with preparation. This is how strategic thinking works. Intelligent people do not simply react to reality after it becomes obvious. They study direction carefully before outcomes fully arrive. Anticipation also applies to human behavior. Strategic thinkers pay attention to repeated patterns in people because patterns often reveal future behavior. Someone who avoids responsibility repeatedly will likely continue doing so. A person who constantly breaks trust in small ways may eventually create larger betrayals. Emotional instability rarely appears suddenly without earlier warning signs. Strategic people observe behavior carefully instead of relying only on promises or appearances. This awareness protects them from unnecessary surprises. Instead of becoming emotionally shocked by predictable outcomes, they recognize patterns early and adjust accordingly. Anticipation requires patience because patterns reveal themselves over time. Reactive people focus only on isolated moments, while strategic people look for consistent direction. They ask themselves important questions. Where is this decision leading? What happens if this pattern continues? What risks are developing beneath the surface? These questions create deeper awareness. This mindset also reduces fear because preparation creates confidence. People panic most when they feel unprepared, but strategic thinkers become calmer during uncertainty because they already considered possible outcomes beforehand. Even if situations become difficult, they adapt faster because they expected change as a possibility. One reason many people struggle with anticipation is because they prefer comfort over reality. They ignore warning signs because uncomfortable truths create emotional tension. Strategic thinkers train themselves differently. They value awareness more than temporary comfort. They would rather face difficult truths early than painful consequences later. Anticipation is not pessimism. Strategic thinkers are not constantly expecting disaster. Instead, they understand that intelligent preparation creates freedom. By thinking ahead, they reduce unnecessary risk and position themselves more effectively for opportunities. Life constantly leaves clues. Patterns appear in finances, relationships, careers, habits, and environments long before major outcomes fully arrive. The strategic mind learns to notice these clues carefully. It understands that small shifts today often become major realities tomorrow. A reactive person waits for pressure before changing. A strategic person recognizes direction early and adjusts before pressure becomes overwhelming. That difference may seem small at first, but over time it creates entirely different lives. Chapter 11. Build quiet confidence through preparation. Real confidence is often misunderstood. Many people associate confidence with loud personalities, constant self-promotion, or outward displays of certainty. But strategic thinkers understand that true confidence is usually much quieter than that. It does not need constant attention or validation because it is built on something far more stable: preparation. A prepared mind moves differently through life. It does not panic as easily under pressure because it trusts its ability to respond. It does not need to exaggerate its abilities because competence speaks clearly on its own. Quiet confidence comes from knowing you have invested time, discipline, and effort into developing yourself long before difficult moments arrive. False confidence depends heavily on appearances. It tries to look strong instead of becoming strong, but appearance eventually collapses under pressure because pressure exposes what preparation reveals. Strategic thinkers focus less on impressing people and more on strengthening themselves internally. They understand that confidence built through discipline lasts far longer than confidence built through image. One reason preparation creates confidence is because uncertainty becomes smaller when skill increases. Fear often grows in areas where people feel unprepared. A person who has never practiced public speaking becomes nervous before presentations. A business owner who never studies finances feels overwhelmed during economic pressure. Someone who constantly avoids growth becomes increasingly insecure when responsibility increases. Preparation reduces this fear because competence changes how the mind responds to challenges. The prepared person still feels pressure, but pressure no longer creates panic. Instead of relying on hope alone, they rely on training, repetition, and understanding. Preston Vale learned this lesson during the early years of his career as an investment analyst in Boston. He was intelligent, ambitious, and deeply determined to succeed in the financial industry. But beneath his polished appearance, Preston constantly felt insecure around senior executives. During meetings, he spoke quickly, over-explained his ideas, and tried hard to sound impressive. He believed confidence came from appearing smarter than everyone else. The problem was that his insecurity quietly controlled his behavior. Whenever difficult questions arose, he became defensive. If another analyst challenged his ideas, he interpreted it personally instead of professionally. Even though he worked long hours, he often focused more on protecting his image than strengthening his actual expertise. One evening, after a particularly difficult presentation where he struggled to answer several important questions clearly, Preston stayed late at the office feeling frustrated and embarrassed. As he gathered his papers, one of the senior partners entered the room. The older man had built a respected career over several decades and was known for his calm, steady presence during high-pressure situations. Before leaving, the partner gave Preston a piece of advice that changed his perspective completely. "Confidence doesn't come from trying to sound capable," he said. "It comes from becoming capable." That sentence stayed in Preston's mind for weeks. For the first time, he realized how much energy he spent trying to appear confident instead of building the preparation that naturally creates confidence. From that point forward, his habits changed. He stopped focusing on impressing people during meetings and started mastering the details of his work more deeply. He studied financial systems longer than required. He prepared extensively before presentations. He anticipated difficult questions before entering important discussions. Slowly, something unexpected happened. The more prepared he became, the calmer he felt. He no longer needed to speak constantly to prove intelligence. He no longer feared difficult questions because he trusted his preparation. Even his communication improved because anxiety no longer controlled him. Years later, younger analysts often described Preston as naturally confident, but what they could not see was that his confidence had been built quietly through discipline, repetition, and preparation over time. This is how real confidence develops. It grows from evidence, not fantasy. Strategic thinkers understand that self-trust is earned internally through consistent action. Every time you prepare seriously, improve your skills, keep promises to yourself, and face discomfort directly, your mind gains proof that you can handle greater responsibility. Quiet confidence also creates emotional stability. People who constantly seek validation become emotionally dependent on outside approval. Their confidence rises and falls based on praise, criticism, attention, or comparison. Strategic thinkers avoid this trap because their confidence comes from internal standards rather than external reactions. This does not mean they never experience doubt. Every ambitious person experiences uncertainty at times, but prepared people recover from doubt faster because they have built real substance underneath temporary emotion. Preparation also creates freedom. A disciplined athlete performs more naturally under pressure because training prepared the body and mind beforehand. A skilled communicator remains calmer during difficult conversations because experience created familiarity. A financially prepared person handles uncertainty better because discipline created stability before problems arrived. Strategic thinkers know that confidence without preparation eventually becomes fragile. Sooner or later, life presents challenges strong enough to expose weakness beneath appearances. But confidence built through preparation becomes far more durable because it is connected to reality instead of ego. One of the quietest forms of power in life is the ability to enter difficult situations calmly because you know you prepared yourself honestly. That calmness cannot be faked permanently. It comes from work done in private, often long before anyone notices the results. The world often celebrates visible success, but strategic people understand that lasting confidence is built invisibly first. It is built in the hours spent learning, practicing, improving, and preparing while nobody is watching. Over time, those quiet investments create something powerful, a mind that no longer depends on appearances to feel strong because it has become strong through preparation itself. Chapter 12. Turn setbacks into strategic advantages. Every person encounters setbacks. Plans fail, opportunities disappear, mistakes happen, and unexpected difficulties interrupt even the most carefully designed path. Yet one of the greatest differences between reactive people and strategic people is the meaning they assign to adversity. Reactive people often see setbacks as proof that life is unfair or that progress has ended. Strategic thinkers see setbacks differently. They view them as information, redirection, and sometimes even hidden opportunity. This mindset changes everything because adversity affects people emotionally before it affects them practically. The moment something goes wrong, the mind begins creating interpretations. Some people immediately assume defeat, others become trapped in anger, blame, or self-pity. But strategic thinkers train themselves to pause and ask a different question. How can this situation be used intelligently? That question creates power because it shifts the mind from emotional reaction to strategic response. One reason setbacks become so dangerous is because they attack identity. People often tie their confidence too closely to success, stability, or external outcomes. When those things disappear, they begin questioning themselves entirely. But strategic thinkers understand that temporary failure does not define long-term potential. In many cases, adversity reveals weaknesses that comfort would have kept hidden forever. Some of the strongest people in the world were shaped by periods of difficulty they never wanted. Pressure forced them to adapt, improve, and rethink their direction. Strategic thinkers understand this clearly. They do not romanticize suffering, but they recognize that hardship often contains lessons, strength, and opportunities invisible at first. Adrian Mercer discovered this during one of the most painful seasons of his career. He worked as a professional photographer in San Francisco and spent years building a successful business specializing in commercial advertising photography. For a long time, his career thrived. Major brands hired him regularly, his reputation grew steadily, and his income provided both freedom and confidence. Then the industry changed rapidly. Advances in smartphone cameras, digital editing software, and social media marketing completely transformed the photography business. Companies that once hired expensive photographers started producing lower-cost content internally. Advertising budgets shifted, clients disappeared almost overnight. Within 2 years, Adrian lost nearly half his business. He became bitter toward the changing industry and constantly complained about how technology was destroying professional standards. Instead of adapting, he spent months emotionally attached to the way things used to be. Every conversation became filled with frustration and resentment. But eventually, financial pressure forced him to face reality honestly. One evening, while reviewing declining business numbers in his small studio office, Adrian realized something uncomfortable. The industry was not going backward. His resistance to change was the real problem. That realization became the turning point. Instead of fighting the changes, Adrian began studying them carefully. He analyzed how brands were using social media differently, how storytelling had evolved online, and what modern audiences responded to emotionally. He realized companies no longer wanted only polished advertising images. They wanted authentic visual storytelling that created emotional connection quickly. Adrian completely redesigned his business. He learned video production, digital branding, and short-form visual storytelling. He started helping companies build full online identity campaigns instead of only taking photographs. Slowly, clients returned. Then new opportunities appeared that had never existed before. Losing his original business model forced him to become more creative, adaptable, and valuable than he had ever been before. The setback he once viewed as destruction had actually become transformation. This is one of the hidden truths about adversity. Sometimes life removes outdated versions of success, so stronger versions can emerge. But this only happens when people stop reacting emotionally long enough to think strategically. Setbacks often contain information that comfort hides. Failure may reveal poor preparation, weak habits, unhealthy relationships, unrealistic assumptions, or outdated thinking. Strategic people pay attention to these lessons instead of wasting all their energy denying reality. They understand that intelligent adaptation creates long-term survival. This mindset also builds resilience. Resilient people are not individuals who never struggle emotionally. They are people who recover intelligently instead of remaining trapped in emotional paralysis. They understand that difficulties are temporary, but the way they respond to those difficulties shapes future outcomes. Strategic thinkers also avoid attaching their identity completely to any single moment of success or failure. They know life moves in seasons, circumstances change, industries evolve, relationships shift, unexpected challenges appear. Flexibility becomes essential because rigid thinking often breaks under pressure. Turning setbacks into advantages requires emotional discipline. During difficult moments, the mind naturally wants immediate relief. People seek someone to blame, something to avoid, or some way to escape discomfort quickly. But strategic thinkers slow themselves down. They observe carefully before reacting. They ask what can still be controlled. They search for leverage inside difficulty instead of surrendering mentally to frustration. This does not mean every setback automatically becomes positive. Some losses are painful, unfair, and deeply difficult. Strategic thinking is not about pretending hardship feels good. It is about refusing to allow hardship to destroy perspective completely. Every challenge contains two battles. The external battle is the situation itself. The internal battle is how the mind responds to it. Strategic thinkers understand that winning the internal battle often determines whether the external situation eventually becomes growth or permanent defeat. Life will test every person eventually. Plans will fail. Circumstances will change unexpectedly. The question is not whether setbacks will happen. The question is whether you will allow those moments to weaken you permanently or force you to become stronger, wiser, and more adaptable than before. Because sometimes the greatest strategic advantage is not avoiding adversity altogether. Sometimes it is learning how to transform adversity into strength. Chapter 13. Discipline creates strategic power. Discipline is one of the least glamorous but most powerful forces in human life. People often search for motivation, inspiration, or sudden breakthroughs, believing success depends on feeling excited all the time. But strategic thinkers understand something far more important. Long-term success is rarely built on emotion. It is built on disciplined behavior, repeated consistently over time. Motivation is temporary. Discipline is dependable. A motivated person may take action for a few days when emotions feel strong. A disciplined person continues even when emotions disappear. That difference may seem small in the beginning, but over months and years it creates completely different results. Strategic thinkers understand this deeply because they know life rewards consistency far more than occasional intensity. Discipline creates strategic power because it builds reliability within the mind. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen self-trust. Every time you follow through despite discomfort, you reinforce mental stability. Over time, disciplined behavior creates momentum that emotional people struggle to maintain. Many people live according to feelings. If they feel motivated, they work hard. If they feel tired, discouraged, distracted, or uncertain, they stop. The problem with this approach is that feelings constantly change. Strategic thinkers cannot afford to base important goals entirely on temporary emotion. They understand that discipline creates progress during moments when motivation disappears. This principle applies to every area of life. Financial discipline creates stability. Physical discipline creates health. Emotional discipline creates stronger relationships. Mental discipline creates focus and clarity. Without discipline, even intelligent people often remain trapped in cycles of inconsistency. Travis Hollow understood this reality during the hardest period of his life. In his early 20s, he dreamed of becoming a professional boxer. He had talent, speed, and natural athletic ability. Coaches believed he had real potential. But after suffering a serious injury during an amateur fight, his career stalled completely. Medical expenses increased, opportunities disappeared, and eventually Travis took a demanding night shift job at a manufacturing plant in Detroit just to survive financially. At first he felt defeated. Watching former competitors continue advancing while he worked exhausting overnight shifts filled him with frustration. Slowly his routines collapsed. He stopped training consistently. His eating habits worsened. Some days he convinced himself that his dream had already ended. But one cold winter morning after finishing a difficult shift, Travis looked at himself honestly and realized something painful. His circumstances had become difficult, but his inconsistency was making everything worse. He was waiting to feel motivated again before rebuilding his life, and those feelings never seemed to arrive. That realization changed him. Instead of focusing on massive transformation overnight, Travis committed himself to discipline in small daily actions. After every shift, no matter how tired he felt, he trained for 1 hour before sleeping. He created strict routines around food, recovery, and physical conditioning. He stopped making decisions based on mood and started making decisions based on commitment. At first, progress felt painfully slow. Some mornings his body ached from exhaustion. Some days motivation disappeared completely. But Travis continued anyway because he understood something important. Discipline becomes strongest when action continues without emotional excitement. Months turned into years. His body became stronger again. His confidence returned slowly. More importantly, his mind changed. Discipline gave him stability. Instead of feeling controlled by circumstances, he began feeling in control of himself again. Eventually, Travis transitioned into coaching young athletes while continuing his own training. The career he originally imagined had changed, but discipline created a life stronger than the one he once lost. Years later, many people admired his mental toughness, but they rarely saw the quiet routines that built it day after day. This is how discipline creates strategic power. It transforms intention into identity. Strategic thinkers understand that small actions repeated consistently often matter more than dramatic effort performed occasionally. A person who studies 1 hour every day eventually develops expertise. A person who saves money consistently builds stability over time. A person who trains the mind daily becomes mentally stronger even when progress feels invisible in the beginning. Discipline also reduces emotional chaos. Undisciplined lives often feel unstable because decisions constantly change based on mood. One day a person feels ambitious. The next day they avoid responsibility entirely. Strategic thinkers create routines and structures because structure protects progress from emotional inconsistency. This does not mean becoming rigid or robotic. Discipline is not punishment. It is alignment between goals and behavior. It is the willingness to act according to long-term priorities instead of short-term comfort. Comfort is one of the greatest enemies of strategic growth. Human nature naturally seeks ease, distraction, and immediate pleasure. But strategic thinkers recognize that comfort often delays growth. The mind becomes stronger when it learns to handle discomfort intentionally instead of constantly escaping it. This is why disciplined people often appear calmer under pressure. Their routines create internal order. They trust themselves because they repeatedly proved they can follow through even when situations become difficult. That self-trust becomes a quiet source of strength. Discipline also creates freedom in ways many people do not understand. Financial discipline creates independence. Health discipline creates energy. Mental discipline creates focus. Emotional discipline creates stability in relationships. Temporary discomfort often creates long-term freedom, while constant comfort often creates long-term weakness. Strategic power is not built in one dramatic moment. It is built through repeated choices made quietly over time. Every disciplined action strengthens the mind's ability to lead instead of react. And eventually, those small repeated decisions create something powerful. A person who no longer depends on emotion to move forward because discipline has become part of their identity. Chapter 14. Learn to think like an architect, not a survivor. Many people spend their lives reacting to problems instead of designing systems that prevent those problems from controlling them. They move from one emergency to another, constantly exhausted, constantly overwhelmed, and constantly trying to recover from situations that repeat over and over again. Strategic thinkers recognize this pattern quickly. They understand that surviving and building are not the same thing. A survivor focuses only on immediate pressure. An architect focuses on long-term structure. This difference changes the way a person approaches time, money, habits, relationships, health, and personal growth. Survivors react emotionally to circumstances as they appear. Architects create systems that reduce chaos before chaos arrives. They understand that a stable and meaningful life is rarely built accidentally. It is designed intentionally through consistent planning, thoughtful decisions, and disciplined structure. Many people wait until problems become painful before making changes. They wait until financial stress becomes severe before learning discipline with money. They wait until health declines before taking care of the body. They wait until relationships become damaged before improving communication. Strategic thinkers approach life differently. They think ahead. They build foundations before pressure forces them to. This mindset creates peace because preparation reduces unnecessary instability. Architects understand that small repeated systems shape long-term outcomes far more than occasional emotional effort. A chaotic life usually reflects chaotic systems underneath it. Miles Donovan learned this lesson after years of outward success and inward exhaustion. He worked as a financial advisor in Dallas and earned a strong income helping clients build investment plans and long-term financial security. Ironically, while he helped other people organize their lives, his own life felt increasingly disorganized. His days were controlled by constant reaction. Emails flooded his mornings. Last-minute meetings filled his schedule. He ignored sleep, skipped meals, and carried stress everywhere he went. Financially, he was successful, but mentally he felt trapped inside permanent urgency. Every week felt like survival. At first, Miles blamed his industry. He convinced himself that high stress simply came with ambition. But one evening, after forgetting an important dinner with his family because of work pressure, he sat alone in his office long after everyone else had gone home and confronted something uncomfortable. His life was not chaotic because of success alone. It was chaotic because he had built no systems to protect balance, clarity, or stability. He had spent years reacting instead of designing. That realization changed the way he approached everything. Instead of trying to solve problems emotionally one at a time, Miles started building structure intentionally. He redesigned his daily schedule around priorities instead of constant urgency. He created boundaries between work and personal life. He organized his finances more strategically instead of spending impulsively during stressful periods. He developed routines around sleep, exercise, and focused thinking. At first, these changes seemed small, but over time the effects became enormous. His mind felt calmer, his decisions improved, relationships strengthened because he became more present emotionally. Most importantly, he no longer felt controlled by chaos because structure had replaced constant reaction. This is the power of architectural thinking. Strategic people understand that systems shape behavior. If your environment is disorganized, your thinking often becomes disorganized too. If your routines encourage distraction, your focus weakens naturally. If your habits constantly create stress, emotional stability becomes difficult. Architects think beyond temporary emotion. They ask deeper questions. What kind of life am I building? What systems support the future I want? What habits repeatedly create unnecessary problems? These questions shift attention away from survival mode and toward intentional living. One reason people remain trapped in reactive living is because reacting feels urgent while building systems feels slow. Emotional problems demand immediate attention. Long-term structure requires patience and discipline, but strategic thinkers understand that repeated emergencies often signal weak foundations underneath. This principle applies to relationships as well. Strong relationships are rarely built only through emotional intensity. They are strengthened through communication habits, trust, consistency, and intentional effort over time. Strategic people do not simply hope relationships stay healthy. They build behaviors that support stability and understanding. The same is true financially. Many people live in cycles of stress because they react emotionally with money instead of building structure. Short-term spending habits quietly create long-term instability. Architects think differently. They create systems for saving, investing, and protecting future security before crisis appears. Mental architecture matters too. Strategic thinkers protect their minds intentionally. They create routines that support clarity, focus, and emotional balance. They understand that constant chaos weakens judgment over time. One of the greatest advantages of architectural thinking is that it reduces unnecessary decision fatigue. Systems simplify life. Discipline becomes easier when environments support discipline. Focus becomes easier when distractions are removed intentionally. Calmness becomes easier when structure reduces chaos. This does not mean life becomes perfect or predictable. Unexpected problems will always exist. But architects handle pressure more effectively because they already built stronger foundations before difficulties arrived. Survival mode keeps people trapped in reaction. Architectural thinking creates direction. Strategic thinkers understand that the quality of a life is rarely determined by isolated moments alone. It is shaped by the systems, habits, structures, and environments repeated consistently over time. And the people who intentionally design those systems gain something incredibly valuable: the ability to build stability instead of constantly fighting chaos. Chapter 15. Become dangerous with clarity. A clear mind is one of the rarest forms of power in the modern world. Many people move through life mentally distracted, emotionally reactive, and constantly pulled in different directions by noise, pressure, opinions, and temporary emotions. Their thoughts are crowded, their attention is fragmented, their decisions become inconsistent because clarity disappears beneath confusion. Strategic thinkers understand that clarity is not something that appears accidentally. It is something that must be protected, strengthened, and trained deliberately over time. Clarity changes the way a person sees everything. It changes decision-making because clear minds are not controlled easily by fear or impulse. It changes relationships because emotionally stable people communicate more honestly and calmly. It changes ambition because focused people stop chasing every distraction and begin directing energy toward meaningful goals. A clear mind creates direction, while a confused mind constantly reacts to circumstances. Throughout this audiobook, you have explored the principles that strengthen strategic thinking. You have learned the importance of emotional discipline, observation, focus, preparation, patience, communication, anticipation, structure, and self-control. None of these ideas exist separately. Together, they create a different way of living. A strategic mind does not simply think differently during business decisions or difficult conversations. It approaches life itself differently. Strategic thinkers do not drift carelessly through their days. They pay attention to patterns. They understand consequences before taking action. They protect their energy instead of wasting it. They prepare before opportunity arrives. They observe human nature carefully. They remain calmer under pressure because they trained themselves to think clearly before reacting emotionally. This does not make them perfect. Strategic people still experience fear, doubt, frustration, and uncertainty like everyone else. The difference is that they refuse to surrender control of their thinking to temporary emotion. They understand that emotional reactions often create permanent consequences. So instead of allowing life to control the direction of their minds, they work intentionally to control the direction of their responses. One of the greatest dangers in life is unconscious living. Many people repeat the same habits, same mistakes, same emotional patterns, and same cycles for years without ever stopping to examine where those patterns are leading. They become trapped inside routine reactions. They wait for motivation instead of building discipline. They seek comfort instead of growth. They confuse activity with progress, and slowly, without realizing it, life begins shaping them instead of the other way around. Strategic thinking interrupts that pattern. It forces awareness. It asks deeper questions. Why am I making this decision? What direction is this habit creating? What consequences will this behavior produce over time? These questions separate intentional living from reactive living. The moment a person begins thinking strategically, life stops becoming random. Choices become more conscious. Actions become more deliberate. Attention becomes more valuable. Clarity also creates independence. A distracted and emotionally reactive person becomes easy to influence because outside pressure constantly shapes their thinking. Trends control them. Fear controls them. Validation controls them. But strategic thinkers develop internal stability. They think for themselves instead of blindly following crowds. They make decisions based on long-term vision instead of short-term emotional pressure. This independence becomes especially important during difficult seasons of life. Pressure reveals mental strength. When uncertainty rises, confused minds panic easily because they have no internal structure holding them steady. But strategic thinkers rely on preparation, discipline, and perspective instead of emotional chaos. They understand that difficult moments are temporary, while the quality of their thinking creates long-term outcomes. Another important truth is that strategic thinking is never fully finished. The mind requires constant training because distraction, comfort, ego, and emotional reaction never disappear completely. Clarity must be maintained intentionally. Discipline must continue daily. Awareness must remain active. This is why strategic living becomes a lifelong practice rather than a one-time achievement. The goal is not to become cold, robotic, or emotionally disconnected. The goal is to become mentally strong enough that emotions no longer control your direction. Strategic people still feel deeply, care deeply, and experience life fully, but they combine emotion with wisdom instead of allowing emotion to replace wisdom. Over time, this creates quiet confidence, not arrogance, not performance, real confidence. The kind built through preparation, self-discipline, observation, and experience. The kind that remains steady even when circumstances become uncertain. A strategically trained mind becomes dangerous in the best possible way, dangerous to chaos, dangerous to manipulation, dangerous to distraction, dangerous to fear, dangerous to the habits and emotional patterns that keep people trapped in smaller versions of themselves. Because once you learn to think clearly, react calmly, observe carefully, and act intentionally, you stop becoming controlled by every temporary situation around you. You begin leading yourself with greater wisdom and greater purpose. And ultimately, that is what strategic thinking truly creates. Not just better decisions, but a stronger life. A life built consciously instead of accidentally. A life directed by clarity instead of confusion. A life shaped by intelligent action instead of emotional reaction. The world will always contain noise, pressure, uncertainty, and distraction, but a trained strategic mind learns how to remain focused within all of it, and that ability may become one of the greatest advantages you ever develop. Conclusion. A strategic life is not built through luck, talent, or sudden breakthroughs alone. It is built through awareness, discipline, patience, and the ability to think clearly when emotions, pressure, and distractions attempt to take control. Throughout this audiobook, you have explored principles that strengthen the mind from the inside out. You have seen how strategic thinkers approach decisions, relationships, pressure, communication, focus, preparation, and adversity differently from reactive people. And at the center of all these lessons is one powerful truth: the quality of your life is deeply connected to the quality of your thinking. Instead, your everyday life presents choices that seem small in the moment. A reaction, a habit, a conversation, a decision, a distraction. Most people underestimate how much these small moments shape the future, but strategic thinkers understand that repeated patterns quietly become destiny. They know that long-term success is rarely created by one dramatic event. It is usually built through consistent, intelligent action repeated over time. This is why awareness matters so much. A person who never examines their own thinking becomes vulnerable to emotional reaction, outside influence, and unconscious habits. But a person who learns to think strategically begins seeing life differently. They stop reacting blindly to temporary emotions. They become more intentional with attention, time, energy, and behavior. Slowly, clarity replaces confusion. You do not need to become perfect to think strategically. Perfection is not the goal. Growth is the goal. Every person will still face fear, frustration, uncertainty, setbacks, and moments of doubt. Strategic thinkers are not people without emotion. They are people who refuse to let emotion control every decision they make. This mindset creates strength over time. Emotional discipline creates stability. Preparation creates confidence. Focus creates progress. Patience creates long-term advantage. The strategic mind understands that meaningful results often require delayed gratification and quiet consistency. While reactive people chase immediate comfort, strategic people invest in lasting growth. One of the most important lessons in this audiobook is that strategic thinking is not reserved for powerful executives, military leaders, or extraordinary geniuses. It is available to anyone willing to train the mind intentionally. Every person has the ability to become more observant, more disciplined, more emotionally controlled, and more thoughtful in their actions. Strategic thinking is not about manipulation or cold calculation. It is about awareness, clarity, and intelligent direction. The modern world constantly encourages reaction, fast opinions, instant emotion, endless distraction, constant comparison. In that kind of environment, clear thinking becomes rare, and rare qualities create powerful advantages. A calm person stands out in chaos. A focused person stands out in distraction. A disciplined person stands out in inconsistency. A strategic thinker stands out in a world filled with emotional reaction. Remember that every environment influences the mind. Protect your focus carefully. Protect your energy carefully. Protect your standards carefully. The people you listen to, the information you consume, and the habits you repeat all shape your thinking over time. Strategic people understand this, which is why they become intentional about what they allow into their lives. At the same time, remain adaptable. Life changes constantly, circumstances shift, opportunities appear unexpectedly, challenges arrive without warning. Strategic thinking is not rigid thinking. It is flexible awareness combined with disciplined action. The strongest minds are not the ones that resist all change. They are the ones that adapt intelligently without losing clarity or direction. As you move forward from this audiobook, remember that strategic thinking is a practice, not a finish line. It is developed daily through observation, reflection, discipline, and experience. Some days you will respond wisely. Other days you will notice old habits trying to return. That is part of growth. The important thing is to continue strengthening awareness instead of drifting back into unconscious reaction. Think carefully before acting, observe before judging, prepare before opportunity arrives, build systems instead of surviving chaos, protect your attention from noise, train yourself to remain calm under pressure, study consequences before making decisions, develop discipline strong enough to continue even when emotions fade. These principles may appear simple, but practiced consistently, they transform lives. In the end, strategic thinking gives you something far more valuable than temporary success. It gives you self-command, the ability to lead your own mind instead of being controlled by every external circumstance. And once a person develops that ability, they begin moving through life with greater clarity, confidence, patience, and purpose. Because the strongest advantage you can ever possess is not merely intelligence, talent, or ambition. It is the ability to think clearly while others lose themselves in confusion. It is the ability to remain focused while others become distracted. It is the ability to act wisely while others react emotionally. And when that ability becomes part of your character, you no longer move through life accidentally, you begin shaping it intentionally.